Welcome to the Gen Z Stoic Podcast,
where every week we strive to lead younger generations on a path to virtue through the insight of Stoic teachings and personal stories from our lives as Gen Z Stoics.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Gen Z Stoic Podcast. I am your co-host, Mateo.
And I am your co-host, Ren. And this week we're taking time to give you a monthly update. We, in Season 3, are emphasizing guests. And so as you've seen in the past couple of episodes, we've had a lot of fun guests on. We've built a lot of great relationships and had a lot of great discussion and also learned quite a bit. And we decided as a podcast that in the midst of all of these guests, we take time every month to just do an episode, or not really an episode, but just a 30, 40-minute conversation between the two of us with some updates from what's happening with the podcast this month, recapping some things we learned, and conveying all that information in a transparent way to our audience. Because if there's one thing we love, it's being authentic and being transparent, in addition to being stoic. So this is our monthly update. Mateo, I guess, can kick it off in terms of we've built some great relationships over the past month, wouldn't you say?
I would say this season and this month and the past month of the podcast has definitely been the most connected I've ever felt to what we've been doing. And it's because I think we've really shown ourselves how I think by the audience and the people we've connected with, how valuable our message is. And we've sort of gotten, I guess, the approval and the validation from these people being like, oh yeah, this is a really good message. And it's not that we needed that validation from other people to know that what we were doing was pretty cool or a good thing, right? But it's certainly helpful when you connect with, best-selling authors and, aspiring entrepreneurs and whatnot. And they're like, yeah, I definitely support this. And now, we haven't necessarily reached anyone insanely huge, but I mean, you have to start small. And so I think the opportunities that we have had to connect with people and honestly build a relationship that is more than just a business relationship, like some long lasting friendships, has been honestly the coolest thing. And I think it's led both of us to be very, very optimistic about the future of where this podcast is going.
Yeah, no, for sure. The connection aspect is what I've felt the most. It's like we've met these really cool people, but they're not even like, this is our guest on the podcast now. It's a lot of these relationships, when you come in and you have people who are doing great work with their individual lives, and then they come in and they're like, wow, we agree with this message. Let's collaborate. Let's work together. Let's put something out there that's positive. There's no really better feeling than that. I know in our last episode with Ryan, we talked about doing things for other people and how fulfilling that feels. And I think that's kind of where we get our sense of fulfillment from this podcast, is not seeing like, oh, we got another subscriber. Do we celebrate that? Yeah, absolutely. We celebrate that. We celebrate everything. But it's the fulfillment of knowing that we're putting a message out there that's really positive and really helpful. And, like we said from day one, if it helps one person, which I'm hoping at this point it has, then we've done our job. So we've done our job. We've met our goal of the podcast. But now, like you said, it's just optimism, seeing where we can go from here, keeping our foot on the pedal, having more guests, having guests with, bigger followings, having guests with more diverse messages, because, we want to get all of this out there to Gen Z. We want a convenient one-stop shop. We talked about that again in our episode with Ryan. It's like these solutions are very simple, but people forget about them, or they never learn about them in the first place. And like you said, I'm connected to that message. I'm connected to these resources now in a way that, a year ago, I think really would have been unimaginable to me, where like it's secondhand nature now, where like I'm throughout my day, free time is spent reading philosophy, reading self-help, reading something, which kind of nerdy, sure, not for everybody, but it's for me. And it's something that I think is a result of me connecting more with the podcast and just having these great experiences with the past month and being able to share them with our very, very loyal followers and audience.
And I think as well, when it, like you said, with your free time, I found myself when I tell people, sometimes they're like, oh, what are your plans? I'm like, oh, I have to work. And they're like, oh, where are you working? And I'm like, I'm actually working on my podcast, like my personal brand with my friend, and we spent a lot of time developing our website, like sort of reestablishing that. And that's super fun to do, actually, is working on something that you created that is your own, that represents you. I think that's sort of the beauty of not just entrepreneurship, but specifically this podcast, is we are doing something that is essentially projecting ourselves to the world. And something I'm very grateful for is, like you said, I think our episode with Ryan was over 2 hours and 15 minutes, which it honestly flew by in the recording process of that. But speaking with another individual from Gen Z who was so like-minded, I think definitely gave us that boost of confidence and that boost of hope as well to meet. I mean, you can see people online and hear about them, but to actually have the privilege of sitting down and talking to one and having such a meaningful discussion for so long, and then, like we were saying, building a really long-lasting connection with that person is it's amazing. And I know at the beginning of the podcast, we were like, yeah, like this definitely is going to go somewhere. But even still, when we hit these, these small milestones and these like private victories, almost, we still celebrate. We're like, I can't believe we actually did it. I can't believe we actually got to this point. But in the beginning, we said we were going to do it. We were like, we're going to get to this point. We're going to do this. But there's a difference between just thinking about it and having it as a goal and then actually achieving it. And then in terms of, I think, I was interviewed recently by someone, and that this will be talked about more, but they interviewed me about the podcast, and I was telling them how the process has become a lot more enjoyable. It's sometimes, especially last year when we didn't really see any growth, we were kind of just like, I mean, me personally, it felt sometimes like I was like, is this going to work? I almost doubted it sometimes. But the one thing I never doubted was the message. That's the one thing that's never been a doubt, was, are we pushing something valuable? And I always knew we were. But the point in saying that is, now I've really learned to appreciate even the days that are grueling at times, and the hard work. The I spent like 6 hours on the website the other day. It was like the longest day of all time. It's all worth it. It's all very fun. It's all something that whenever I think about the podcast, I think about both of us and how it's going to benefit both of us. And I think that's something that is helping pushing me forward to keep working on it as well, is like our wins together.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I was kind of, to be completely honest, I was kind of in the same boat, especially before we started utilizing like AI and we started doing clips and we started changing the style a little bit. The old style we had of like Zoom and, a few edits and stuff, it looks so simplistic and so like kind of rookie compared to what we have now. And we've seen the growth as a result. And I think it's something where you talked about, like, it lends hope. And to me, I've kind of noticed, for as much as we don't like social media and we talk about influencers and how they're ruining our youth, content creation is something that truthfully is fun. Like, if I'm being completely honest, content creation is fun. Just the process of editing this and distributing it and all of these things, it's fun. It's very enjoyable, and it's also a lot of hard work. So, even these influencers who are not contributing nothing to society with the content they make, it's kind of made me, I guess, softer in that sense towards influencers and towards that culture. Now, do I believe like in the message or the content or anything? No, but I think, putting the hard work and the hard learning experiences we've had, because we've certainly had a lot of learning experiences, it's kind of lended itself to, soften me out a bit towards that. And I think having these guests on the podcast has done that as well, where I love the Seneca quote, men learn as they teach. We are learning as we have these guests on. We are sitting here and we're writing notes down, we're learning things, and then, you know, whether it's Giovanni in meditation or Victor, like I'm writing stuff down and then I go look back and I'm like, wow, that's really insightful. And so it's a valuable resource not only to our audience, as we hope, but to us. And that's what I think, not to be all boastful, but I think that's kind of where we stand out as a podcast, is we're not trying to have viral guests. Our evaluation of the guests is like, if we can learn something from them, us two, then we want to have them on, because then we think that, then everybody easily can. And that's kind of our measure, right? Is we want to learn. If we're learning from our guests, then we're producing good content, because people are going to learn a lot of valuable things and are going to take away things that are key to life in them. That's the goal of the podcast. You have a lot of podcasts nowadays where the goal is for two people, three people, just to sit around and talk about random BS. And that's fine. Again, no hate towards that, but the message is why we stuck around, I feel like. and how it's inspired our lives and changed our lives is why we're here. And I think that every time we meet somebody who shares a story similar to us, which like Ryan did, and then they drew similar conclusions and they say, well, now let's go spread this message, that's powerful. And the more individuals in society you can have do that, the sooner we start to change society for the better. So that's why I encourage anybody listening to the podcast, if you have something to share, either get in contact with us. We'd be happy to have you on the podcast if you have something to share, or go start your own podcast. Go start your own content, because the world needs more positive content. We're in a sea of negative content right now, whether it's news, influencer culture, a lot of different categories of negative. But there's some positives out there. So I would encourage, anybody listening to this to go contribute to the positive side so that we can create a positive society.
Well, you mentioned the message, and that's what's kept us going. I think the whole reason behind why we're doing this, and always has been, is the message and the purpose. And that's the reason that it has kept us going, and it will keep us going in the future. I had someone ask me the other day, like, is the goal of your podcast to kind of go all the way? And I was like, no, I mean, the goal was never, to be famous and to have millions and millions of people. But if that is the outcome of persistent teaching of a purpose and a message that we believe in, then yeah, like the goal is to go all the way. The goal is to be, you know, well known by people because of who we are and the message that we're spreading. The goal is not for us to be well known. The goal is for Stoicism to be well known. And, you can't really, with the podcast, we can't really have those be mutually exclusive. So I guess, yes, if someone were to ask me, like, do you want to go all the way? Yeah, we do. And I told him the stat that we know, right? It takes on average about 400-ish, a couple more episodes to really, I guess, become an accredited podcast. To really
Shout out to the guy who sent us that. Somebody DM'd us that on Instagram, and that's something that honestly, has been something I think I look at when numbers seem low or something flops. I'm like, well, let's go back and look at the statistics. So yeah, just a quick interjection there, but shout out whoever sent us that.
No, and that number kind of sticks with me all the time as well. I mean, so they asked me how many episodes do you guys have, and I was like, I mean, with the Stoic readings and all the episodes, I think we may be around 65 or so. So we're not even a quarter of the way there if you want to follow that average. So we have a long ways to go. And you also mentioned before how the formality has changed and how we used to see how we were very, like, it was very rough to start and we were very rookie. But in the year, we're going to be saying the exact same thing about where we are now. Right now, we're like, oh, we're sort of, we're so much better than we were. And then in a year, it's going to be the exact same thing. We're just going to keep getting better. And it's all going to come in different ways. I think we'll definitely still be using AI. Hopefully, potentially, we have, maybe even added in sponsors or ads at some point. That's definitely been an idea that we've had. I think the biggest thing about the podcast that is something that we don't really talk about, that I find to be super, super enjoyable, is just the relationship that we've developed over the years, I guess. I mean, we've been doing this for like a year and almost a year and a half now, but even just before that, while we were still in school, before we'd even started the podcast, and Stoicism was what was bringing us together. The relationship and the friendship that we had has grown increasingly more valuable because of what we have been practicing and what we have been what we find similar, the values that we hold, the values that we share, that we both share. And that to me is something that, I feel like without, especially the podcast, we definitely wouldn't be as close with those values. And so I've sort of started to learn that I think the gains and the victories are the people that you meet and the friends that you make on the way forward. It's not the numbers. I mean, yes, we celebrate every subscriber. I think we text each other like every day, if not every other day, like, oh, new subscriber, oh, new subscriber. And we're grateful for every individual victory, because right now we're starting small. And so every single little victory, we're like, hey, we got one. But the biggest victories that really mean the most, that, I mean, we don't need any subscribers. I mean, we could just help one person and we would be fine. But the most important thing is just the actual relationship that we built together. It's kind of crazy. it all feels like it happened very fast, but it feels like we've been doing this for a very long time also.
No, it's the lesson is the friends we made along the way. That's yeah. No, I completely agree, and I think our friendship is kind of evidence that a lot of the qualities we talk about in terms of what you should seek in a friendship, how you should approach a friendship, is things that we've employed, and I think having such a healthy, I guess, for lack of a better term, such a productive friendship, where the two of us, we really do great things together, I think is a reflection of all of those qualities that we've been preaching. So that's honestly my favorite thing I love to see is I don't put 100% of what we say on the podcast into practice perfectly. Nobody's going to do it 100% perfectly. But when I teach about things on the podcast and then I go double down and try and reevaluate how I'm approaching life in that way, then I double down, right? I follow through. I'm like, well, if I spend an hour talking about it, I might as well see what happens if I practice it and my life improves. And I don't know if that's something that you've noticed, but I'll come across like some kind of niche topic that Stoicism covers that we haven't talked about on the podcast. And like, here's our perspective on, what was it, eating animals the other day? Seneca being a vegetarian. This was a while ago, but we were discussing that. And it's just things like that I discover, and I'm like, well, I'm not going vegetarian. I need to eat meat so I can bulk up, but so I'm not going to do that. But just their perspective on like how we treat animals is something that's kind of nuanced and not mainstream. So take a look at that and adopt a few of those views, and I'm like, wow, it doesn't revolutionize my world, but like that's a better perspective. I found a better perspective, and I think that's something that everybody can stand to benefit from. Is the podcast is great, but you have to go out and seek those resources yourself, because the takeaways I have from reading A Letter from Seneca, which I published with Stoic Readings, they're going to be different than yours. And it might not be something that clicks. That's something, again, that I've realized with the relationships and the guests that we built, is that Stoicism doesn't have to be like the 100% answer. Stoicism's what's helped both of us. I think if you're struggling managing your emotions, Stoicism is probably the best thing you can find out in the world, along with meditation itself and being in a meditative state. But not everything is going to click, right? So you need to check out these resources for yourself so you can find what clicks. Because I can't tell you what clicks. Mateo can't tell you what clicks. Nobody can, except for you. So that's kind of what I've learned, is that we're going to keep preaching Stoicism. We're going to keep finding these niche topics. We're going to keep discussing them. We're going to keep having guests. We're going to do all those things. But Stoicism doesn't have to be like the end all be all. And that's, again, something that I've realized over the past month. And it's something, maybe it's a bit uncomfortable considering we're called the Gen Z Stoic podcast, but it's a more nuanced approach to life. So we don't want to have to fit a square peg in a round hole. We want a proper solution. So that's the point to be made there, is this just that, we appreciate everybody tuning in. Like you said, we celebrate every small victory. Like, oh, a subscriber. Oh, we lost one. Oh, a subscriber. Oh, we lost one. Oh, here's our numbers. Like that's our journey, and we're going to keep enjoying it. So we encourage you to tune into the podcast so we can celebrate even more victories between the two of us and also with our audience, which is the purpose of doing this monthly update. But keep tuning in, keep paying attention, but seek out the resources yourself. And I love when people tell us, here's a book I've read. What do you guys think about it? We've had a couple of those instances happen. I'm reading The Rebel by Albert Camus, I believe. I don't know how to say his last name. I'm not good with French names, and that was a recommendation from somebody on our social media. And it's a book that, I've actually very much struggled to read. It's a hard book to get through, but I'm learning a lot from it. And so I really appreciate those insights. And if people can give us those recommendations, then it goes to show, there's more out in the world than Stoicism that you should check out. Are you going to agree with all of it? No, that's kind of the idea of philosophy, is you find one train of thought and you kind of stick with that school. But you can mix and match and find a solution that works for you.
Well, and like you said, that goes back to, as we teach, we learn, because we're teaching other people and then they teach us back. They're like, oh, yeah, this is cool. Have you tried this? And that's fantastic. And I love recommending books to people. I love recommending books. Anyways, the thing I was going to say as well is, with the amount of people that we've had on and the perspectives that we've seen, it's very interesting that even people who aren't necessarily considering themselves practicing Stoics, when we talk about, they could be practicing Buddhism, or like Ryan, he was in I mean, neuroscience, psychology. He was in all these different fields. But what I have noticed is whenever we talk about sort of the fundamental principles of Stoicism, people say, "Oh yeah, like what I'm doing is teaching something similar," and I think that's so great, is because there's this golden thread that links, Stoicism to and philosophies together, because it is the study essentially just of human nature, just of how we are, and at the end of the day, we are all similar in ways because we are one species, and so I think that's why it's so applicable to everybody, is everybody can find at least one thing to relate to with Stoicism, is because it relates to how we think and how we act and our everyday lives. um I would also like to say about the website as well. Something that we have worked on is our own media kits, and that was a cool feeling. That was a super cool thing to do, and we actually didn't. The only reason we sort of really got that idea was because the people we were having on had their own, and that was sort of something we realized we should probably do the more we connect with other people. So if you have not checked out the updated website, there are two major updates. One, if you go to our episodes page, typically our episodes were just linked to Spotify on our website. But now if you click on any one of our episodes, it's linked to an entirely new page where you can read the description, and you can click a link to any platform that we have it on. So YouTube, RSS, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. That was cool. And secondly, if you go to our About Us page, that is also updated. We have our mission, our story, and then our own individual media kits if you want to learn more about who we are and connect with us outside of the podcast. But that aside, I do not want to just market and market and market and advertise, but it is something that we worked on and like had discussions around that felt very, it's kind of like like upgrading the website and whatnot. And as much as we have enjoyed doing that, we know and are planning on getting someone to do it professionally at some point. But for the time being, it is very cool to just do it ourselves and kind of understand the value and how hard it is to really build your own brand. But
Yeah, no, definitely go check that out. Mateo carried on that his 6-hour day like he was talking about. So props to Mateo for that hard work.
but we split workloads. Okay, so it's not like we split workloads very evenly when it comes to things. Ren is an editing master and he does that. And but just saying, yes.
Yeah, no, website updates looking good. Probably need to do some new headshots. Looking rough. State title looking rough. It was a year ago. It's okay. But besides that, the media kit, something we're very proud of. I think it's a better look at us. Something we've realized is that we, unfortunately, you mentioned it earlier, us being known and the podcast being known go hand in hand, unfortunately. I talk with you a lot and with other people a lot about how if I was able to spread this message and have this podcast without anybody knowing who I am, that would be preferable. I like to remain anonymous, but that aside, we've put a lot of hard work in, and we realized that if that's the case, if we have to be known along with the podcast, we might as well make it look good, right? We might as well make it as authentic as possible, as genuine as possible. And I think that's what we did with the media kit. And it took, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of planning, but we also, like you said, with the guests we've had on and other people we've seen and have inquired about having on the podcast, media kits are pretty prevalent, and they're pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, they're pretty cool. They're a neat thing to have, and we have them now. So yeah, like Mateo said, be sure to go check them out. And independent of that, there haven't been a lot of changes to the podcast. We continue to do our Stoic readings. We continue to do our episodes. So the website is the main thing. But moving forward, I think we keep mentioning, keeping our foot on the pedal, keeping working. And that looks like more guests, these monthly updates, which will happen probably towards the end of each month. And it'll be something that's, quicker than, 2-hour episodes, probably going to be like 40 minutes, 35 minutes, just giving you some updates just so we can connect. I think that something that's lost when you have a podcast is, and you have guests on, is the host's message, the host voice, the connection. It gets lost a little bit. And that's what I think the monthly update is for. And I hope that's not what is happening, but we've had some pretty in-depth, long interviews, and I think they're only going to get better from here. If you look at just successively our first 3 interviews, I think each one went great, but was better than the last. And we're going to continue to improve. So that's where I think our biggest improvement lies, is our interview style, our questions, all of those things. Something that we definitely need and would greatly appreciate feedback on.
Yeah. And if you look at, our first, even just within a couple weeks, our first interview with Giovanni to our most recent one with Ryan, it was very robotic with Giovanni, because we just had a set list of questions that we thought we were going to have to read out and then answer. But then as we realized, we're like, it's a podcast. It should be a discussion. It shouldn't be, as interview style. Sure, we should always read up and research the person, but then it really just becomes, we're not going to ask them and they just talk. We're going to ask them, they'll talk, and then we'll add on. We want to all be providing value, right? And so, like Ren said, if anybody has any advice or recommendations, it is not easy to run a 2-person interview without being in the exact same room as one another. So that's one of the biggest like caveats we encountered. We were like, wait, how are we going to know who's going to talk after? And so we kind of developed our own system, and it's working. I think it's working pretty well. But if you have any advice, please let us know. Do not be afraid to send us an email or a DM or a comment or anything like that. All feedback is greatly appreciated. And I think I don't have anything new to add, but just to say, as a message of gratitude to the audience that we have developed thus far, if you are new, if this is the first episode you're listening to, welcome. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. And thank you for all your support and continued listening of our podcast. It means a lot to have, people who follow the message that we're trying to put out, which is interesting because it's not actually our message. It's just a message that already existed that we are reiterating and reemphasizing and kind of redistributing to the modern generation. It's something that we've realized our generation needs desperately, that these basic fundamental ideas of philosophy could honestly change the way our generation thinks, and therefore how we influence the people around us. I love talking to my friends and people who are unfamiliar with Stoicism, because I get very passionate about it. I could talk to them for hours, and they're like, oh, like, what is Stoicism? And I'm like, oh, let me tell you, like, let's sit down and grab a coffee for a couple hours and I would talk your ear off. But it's something that, because Ren and I are so passionate about this idea, it's so easy to, wake up early on the weekends and just sit down here and just have these conversations, or put in the 6-hour days. It makes it so much easier. And I think that's where we really try to separate ourselves from a lot of podcasts, is authenticity. There is no mask that we're trying to put on to the public. There is no, we're going to act all stoic online, and then as soon as we leave the podcast, we're going to go be these terrible people who just verbally abuse our peers, right? Of course not. No, that's not who we are. Everything we do is authentic. And like Ren said, we are not perfect, and we are not perfect practicers of Stoicism, but what we do have is a passion for it. And I think that is more than a lot of people have, is a true passion and a true ambition to spread something.
Yeah, and there's like an accountability buddy that goes along with that, and that is the podcast. I don't know, the thoughts towards this perspective, but it seems, when there are times where, maybe I'm not acting how I should, or following these things, as I should, there are times where I simply look and I'm like, I have, I don't know, at this point, maybe like 450, like we have a sizable group of people who listen to the podcast and look to us for advice on Stoicism. So I have to best live those practices so I can just simply convey the information I learned. And that, so sometimes for me, that is the motivation. When I'm having a rough day and you're like, oh, today would be a good day to take a rest day, or, take a break, go take a nap, not be productive, things like that, of that nature. I simply look and I'm like, wow, I have to do this for, people I'm representing here, the people who I'm conveying this information towards. Because if I'm sitting on my butt all day on the couch and then I go on the podcast, I'm like, this is what I did this week and this is what I learned. That's not right. That's not okay. And we see that a lot nowadays. I'm softer on influencers, but the number one thing I hate, and I think we see this from a lot of kind of, macho masculinity, this is stoicism videos where it is a mask, it's a character, it's a facade of this, really macho masculine man who's stoic and, all these things, and then they just become a character to where they're saying all these things, but you can tell. You can tell just by listening that they don't live those things, and they're just putting on a persona and are using stoicism to be this viral, like, you shouldn't have any emotions, this is stoicism, this is how you get all the women, this is how stoicism doesn't care how you get women. Stoicism is a philosophy. It could not care what kind of game you have, how you seduce people. Philosophy doesn't care about that thing.
Philosophy and Riz do not coincide. Let's
No,
for a generation who doesn't understand Riz and philosophy, no.
I'm not using that term, so thank you for covering me there.
Well, it is the Gen Z Stoic, and our Gen Z lingo is sort of terrible. So that pained me to speak. Keep going.
Yeah, no, so we see all these things and it's just a facade. And I think if we can, the Daily Stoic does a good job. I know a lot of people have issues with Daily Stoic being about hustle culture and how Stoicism relates to hustle culture, but I think the Daily Stoic at least markets itself as an authentic, like, Stoic podcast. And there's other podcasts that I can't think of right now, but there's a few good ones. Stoic Conversations, I believe, is one of them, where, like, you can tell there's authenticity and it's genuine. And those are the podcasts that I think are really doing well, and so that's a good thing. But then you get on YouTube and you see these, I sent you the picture the other day of that really, really heinous title. It was like 7 reasons why women prefer older men, and I'm not really sure how that relates to stoicism, but they threw stoicism in there, so that really pains me. And I think it's like I said from the beginning. There's a lot of negative content out there. In this sense, negativity in terms of it's a misrepresentation of what stoicism is. And so we're part of the positive solution. I hope in the future, I think one of our goals is to team up with Ryan Holiday, maybe get on the podcast, have something of that nature, so that we can kind of squash all this disinformation and accurately represent stoicism for this generation. Now, stoicism, I think, has to change a little bit, and that's where we get into contemporary versus modern stoicism. I'm not going to go into that tangent today because this is more of a monthly update, not a history lesson of how stoicism has changed. But as we kind of fit and adapt stoicism without losing its core tenets and its teachings to the digital age, I think we're going to see more positivity. We're going to see more podcasts like this. We're going to see less of the BS. Like, this is how you drive a nice car and have 10 wives. Stoicism doesn't care about any of those things. Philosophy doesn't care about any of those things, because the people who are pursuing all those things are rotten on the inside. So when they have all those things, they're still going to feel rotten. Philosophy teaches you to feel great on the inside, so that whether you are doing all those things, or you're living on the street, or you're somewhere in between, wherever you're at in life, wherever your journey is, you're going to feel fulfilled because you feel good on the inside. That's a power nobody can take away. And so all these videos that are like, here are these external things that philosophy can give you to make you happy, directly opposes the just underlying thought process behind a philosopher and living a philosophical life. So ignore that, embrace the positive, is what I say.
Yes, I think that is a great message. Like you said, all the materialistic people who could have all of their possessions stripped away and not have themselves. See, with stoicism, you could have no possessions, but if you have yourself, you are fully happy, right? That's sort of the two sides of that spectrum. And so that's the thing is we want to feel fulfilled. We want to feel like we have purpose, and we want to feel internally, at peace. I guess I don't know if you will ever fully feel internally at peace. I don't know if there's like how that feels, but I think it's just the act of trying to get there that brings you closer and closer and leads you to live a happier and more fulfilled life. And so with that, we on this podcast just want to say that embrace the positive and keep listening if you need advice, and reach out to us if you have questions or feedback, because all is welcomed. And I think with that, I don't personally have anything else to add, but we
Yeah,
can.
no, I have a few final notes on on that front. I think one thing that we can improve, one area we can improve on is fan engagement. We do get a lot of comments. Some are negative. We don't respond to negativity. So, somebody makes a stupid comment on there, it's kind of something that's pretty funny. But fan engagement in terms of, people who have questions about Stoicism should reach out to us. People who have critiques of Stoicism should reach out to us and see what we think, see what we have to say about it. People who have feedback should reach out to us. We want to connect with you guys, with our audience. Like that's our number one goal, is to put Stoicism into action with like a face and a name that we can give advice to and help out. It's the goal of the podcast. And it might be scary or whatever, but we're here for all of that, and we're here to give the advice to the best of our ability and help whoever in whatever situation. But one final note I'll say is, if you have not checked out the episode with Ryan, I encourage you to specifically listen to the part where he talks about like his spark and how he wakes up in the morning, because it's the best way to put something that I think both of us have been feeling for a while since we've been practicing Stoicism. And it's something that I never have, I guess, expressed explicitly, but just that spark and this idea that once you kind of discover what clicks for you and you find the golden thread, whatever kind of analogy you want to use, once that point happens, you go from waking up in the morning in whatever state you're in, whether you're sad, you're angry, you're neutral, whatever, to you just wake up and you're invigorated. And I think that's part of the reason why we can do these 6-hour days for the podcast and wake up early despite having school and heavy workloads, is we feel invigorated when we do this. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like, let's get it. Like I'm ready to do this. We're going to create some content today. Like I'm really excited to spread this message. And it's something where I think everybody can find that. And Ryan does a good job about talking about that. So if you haven't checked out the episode, I'm going to plug it here, because it does a great job explaining what I'm talking about, where you get to that point and you feel that spark, you feel invigorated, and then you have to go share that message. That's your energy. And I think that's something that we need a lot more of, because we see in society today, there's a lot of people who spread like despair and are sad all the time, and they spread sadness and negativity. Not necessarily their fault. I'm not blaming anybody there. But like we know a lot of people who are like the negative people in our life, where you have a negative issue, like it goes towards them because they spread negativity. And I'm a big believer in like the energy you have internally is going to be what's around you, what you surround yourself with. So once you find the positive in your life and it clicks and you find this roadmap to living fulfilled, you want to share that as much as possible. And so that starts with your friends, and then you just spread that message and you find that spark, you find that really invigorating feeling. And I think that's what we're doing here. And I want everybody to be able to feel that. I think everybody can. Everybody is very easily capable of finding a state where they feel that way. And having experienced it myself, not where it's like a sense of superiority where, oh, I've found this, golden ticket and you don't have it. Haha. No, it's, wow, my life has gotten so much better because I think about things this way now. Why doesn't everybody think like this? Why doesn't everybody feel this way? Let's change this. That's what you get. And that's what the podcast is about. That's who I think the guests we've had on this podcast are about. And that's what we need more of in Gen Z. And it starts at the individual level. So every individual we can convert to this train of positivity, to finding their spark, to being invigorated with this energy to share their spark, is something, we can really be happy about and really take a lot of pride in.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I kind of spaced that. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I think the big thing as well, like Ren said, if you have not listened to our Ryan episode, our episode with Ryan, I think that has been, because it was such a long conversation, that was probably our most loosely structured guest episode this far, because it was, we did not walk in with the script. We walked in with like maybe half a page of notes just about who he was, and then had the most open conversation. It almost reminded me of like how the George Janko podcast kind of works, where it's just honest conversation, just back and forth. It almost felt like we were doing something very, very similar to that, because it was just us agreeing with each other the whole time. And then we didn't necessarily have, it wasn't that we didn't have differing perspectives on certain things, but everything sort of came full circle, and it just felt very wholesome and very authentic, which I think if there was one thing I could listen to for 2 hours, it would be authentic people speaking, right? And just an authentic view on a certain topic, no matter what it is. So yes, like you said, if you have not listened to that episode, one, the area where Ryan talks about how he wakes up in his day is fantastic. But also, we had a quote off in that episode. I think we had like 10, 12 quotes that we said, if not more. It
And
was
metaphors. And metaphors.
metaphors, analogies, quotes. Like that was the most insane episode we have ever done, because it was like, oh, you know this quote? Yeah, I do. I also know this quote. And it was like crazy. So there is at least one quote in that episode that will resonate with you. So just I would encourage you to listen to that dialogue and just the conversation that young people are having. I would let that inspire you. Our audience ranges from our age and a little bit younger to 30s and 40s. So I think at any age people will find value in that conversation, because it's not about oh, we're young so we're not credible for what we're talking about. It's no, look, we're young and we are able to discuss all of this. So that episode was so fun. That was
Oh,
a
yeah, for sure.
fantastic experience.
Yeah, if you're somebody who's looking for like a mantra or a quote to put on your wall that's like very inspirational, you should also listen to that episode because there's a lot of good content for you in it. But I think the final thing to note there is that if you are somebody who is our age, or maybe you're not our age, but you have something to share about your life story and it relates to philosophy, relates to Stoicism, we would be happy to have you on, especially if you are in Gen Z, because I think the more people we can get who are our age, look like us, have been through our experiences, and have something to share from it, the more we all learn and the more we all grow. So if you're somebody who falls into that category and you'd like to come on the podcast, you'd like to share your message, be sure to contact us because we would love to have you on. And like Mateo said, I think we found our structure, and it's being unstructured, because I think when we have openness and we have authenticity, I think we kind of shine the brightest in terms of speaking ability. And I think we create the best content and the best message to share. So again, I'll reemphasize, if you're somebody who has something to share in your life story, relates to Stoicism, relates to philosophy, or you know somebody who you think may fit the category, or you have people in mind who you'd like to see on the podcast because you're an active listener, contact us. We're open. We're going to have a lot of guests on in the coming months, and we're very excited to see who they are, the form they take, and where we can go from here.
Yes. So with that, stay tuned. Stay tuned. If you do not follow us on our Instagram, we will be posting our episode updates and occasional clips. Check out our website. Like we said, we talked about the media kits, and you can read the description of all of our episodes there from season 1 up to our most recent season 3. We are also on Rumble. Unfortunately, we cannot get you a link to our Rumble until we have achieved 10 followers, and we are at 8. So we're getting there. It's a process. So every victory is being counted. So as soon as we get 10 followers, we will link Rumble to you guys, so it is more easily accessible, and you do not have to link it. Again, we are also on TikTok if you want to see more just clips of our episodes, just shorter, if you are interested. And then our YouTube. Our YouTube is sort of our big thing that we are working on right now. And then again, we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And if you have another streaming service, check out our RSS website, and you can listen to our podcast on a plethora of platforms through RSS. So I think with that, this has been a recap of our April month so far. And we are very grateful to have come as far as we have, and to have the wins and even the setbacks in the 6-hour days, all of it. We are grateful for all of it. And we are grateful for you being in our community. So with that being said, this has been another episode of the Gen Z Stoic Podcast. I have been your co-host, Mateo.
And I've been your co-host, Ren. Make sure to tune in next week for our next interview and check out some more of our content in the meantime.